A Science of Change, podcasting by Gil Crosby, social scientist, author, and organization development professional since 1984. Welcome to another podcast, and today I have a very exciting guest and friend, Dr. John Scherer, one of the original staff of the Leadership Institute of Seattle, helped my father create the program that is, changing lives still today, rejuvenating as we speak. And if you want to know more about that, John and Ron and Dad, the original team of the graduate program, are actually going to be online December 14th at 6 o'clock Pacific time. And you can easily link into that by going to lios.org. So, John, that's a long introduction. I'm really happy to have you here today.
That's great, Gil. Actually, LIOS originally, as you know, was Leadership Institute of Spokane. That's where it was. And, we early on, we realized if it moves, it needs to move to a city that starts with an S.
Fortunately for you, that was the next closest city.
Absolutely.
Well, I remember it well because I helped clean the basement in the United Methodist Church where LIOS began as a non-graduate program.
Exactly.
And my brother helped create the pillows that the students sat on.
Exactly.
Giant pillows.
And I lived in the house right next door to you guys. Remember that house was available, so I bought it. It was when
I remember it well.
Yeah, cool.
You're the only OD person I know that knew me when I was a teenager.
That's right. You and I go way back. This is great, Gil. Thank you so much for having me here. Yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure. So look, John, I'm just want to have an informal chat with you, and I'm curious about like your life before you got with Dad, and how you got with Dad, and your life now.
Sure. Well, this is actually, I'm so glad you're asking me about this because meeting your dad actually changed my life. And as I tell people, when we met, I was a Lutheran pastor.
Right.
And I tell people that I was called out of the ministry into this work of applied behavioral science. Now, I've spent the last 15 years in Poland. Maybe we'll get to that, introducing OD to Eastern Europe. And of course, that's a Catholic country, and they just don't quite believe that there's anything above being a priest, But this is absolutely was the case for me. So let me go back. So after college, I graduated from Roanoke College in Virginia, amazing school, in 1962. And I decided to go to Officer Candidate School in the Navy. That's another story. Because I wanted go ahead.
Well, you were on ships.
Yeah, so
in combat,
after Officer Candidate School, I was a combat officer on a U.S. Navy destroyer from 1962 to 1966. Now, that's important. When I look back on those 4 years, Gil, when I look at leadership and personal development and teamwork and all that stuff, those 4 years, at the moment, I didn't realize how significant those 4 years were on the destroyer, on the pointy end of the spear kind of thing. And what I realized is what I learned there, again, had reinforced is I don't care who you sleep with. I don't care what God you talk to or don't talk to. I don't care what color you are. I don't care if you went to school or where you went to school. I don't care about any of that. The only thing I care about is, are you on this team? Are you committed? Are you going to have our back, when the what hits the fan? And then how to motivate and bring together a group of guys in those days, all guys from all kinds of different backgrounds, to be a high performing team. I didn't know that's what I was doing, but I didn't have any book. Nobody trained us how to do that. It was just what you had to do if you were going to survive, basically. So I realized it was a school of sorts for me to learn a lot about leadership, and teamwork. Okay, fast forward.
Well, before you fast forward, maybe I'm wrong, but I also think that you had to have clarity and feedback.
Absolutely.
That
It was
that
constant.
was precise.
It was constant, Gil. I mean, basically, the feedback was severe. That is, if you really screwed up, people died, kind of thing, And so it wasn't
Right,
just like you get a 3 out of 5 on a smile sheet or something like that. It's like,
right.
and we were constantly training, constantly being evaluated. And here's a key point, Gil. Every time we trained, we failed because what they would do is they would increase the attacks, increase the intensity of the information. I'm sitting in this chair in combat, evaluating all this information: airplane attacks, surface ships, submarines, intelligence, all that stuff. And my job was to integrate all this data and then recommend to the bridge how to who do we shoot first? How do we basically
Uh-huh.
fight the ship? And so
You
it
were a
was well, I
control
was
officer?
well, my job was called TWA, Threat Evaluation and Weapon Assignment. So the
Okay.
XO and I, yes, so the XO and I were gathering all this information and then recommending to the bridge what to do. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So,
And by feedback, I just meant that like you had to know who was doing what,
I had
and
to know the
and
whole.
they.
Actually, Gil, in order to qualify as the officer of the deck, I had to be able to replace the captain. Okay, and that took. It was supposed
Hmm.
to take about 2 years. I was in for 4 years. I think at about 18 months, the captain said, "Okay, Mr. Scherer, you're now officer of the deck qualified." I had to understand weapons and propulsion and electronics and navigation and all that stuff. So it was a really kind of a. But the point I want to make is that every time we trained, the people conducting the training would increase the intensity of the attacks until we were so saturated that we failed. So we failed every
Uh-huh.
time we trained. So it was training to failure. But every time we failed, the goal was to fail a little bit better. So when I look
Hmm.
back on it, then that those 4 years trained me to deal with failure because
That's interesting.
we failed every time we trained. We never won.
Right, right.
We were always overwhelmed every time we trained. But boy, we got to be pretty good. Yeah.
Probably kept you from being too cocky, though.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. So after the Navy, I remember sitting in my stateroom. This is a very significant moment in my life. It was quiet. I had about 6 months left in the Navy. I wasn't sure exactly what to do, and when I look back on it, I think I was in that kind of a liminal state, halfway. And I was, and this voice came to me. I never talked about this because it's so spooky for people.
Mm.
But I heard a voice
Hmm.
as loud, as clear as you're talking right now. John, be with people at the level of their deepest need. And one of my jobs was an air controller, so I remember thinking, say again, over, and, it said, John, be with people at the level of their deepest need. And I remember at the time thinking, could you be a little bit more specific? So anyway, I took a yellow pad. I wish I could find that piece of paper, and I wrote down, okay, who are people that I know? What are some jobs or roles that I know about that where you're with people at their deepest need? So I had an aunt who was a social worker. I had an uncle who was a doctor. I had another uncle in the State Department, and I had teachers and all this stuff. And then I come from 4 generations of Lutheran ministers on my father's side.
Hmm.
I'm John Jacob Scherer the fourth, and all of them except for my pop, who decided to be a newspaper man slash alcoholic. So he broke the chain. So I got to the end of the list, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go to seminary. This is like a hairball. I'm going to get it out of my throat one way. I'm going to go and get this out of my system one way or the other. So I went to seminary and absolutely loved it, Gil, because I grew up in the parsonage. The first 5 years of my life, I lived with my grandfather, who was a Lutheran pastor of the church there. And so I was steeped in the theology of the Lutheran traditions. I just nailed seminary. It's like a kid in a candy store. And then my first assignment was a street ministry in Norfolk, back to the Navy city, where I walked the streets at night with
Okay.
a collar and a crucifix, and I just hung out with
Uh-huh.
people of the night. There were hookers and sailors, Marines, people like that. I would go into a bar, sit at the bar, not in a booth, but at a bar with an empty seat beside me for people to come up and talk to me. And after a while, the bar girls, I had 4 or 5 bars that were like my beat, And so they were called bar girls, the women that were serving the beer and stuff. They were my referral service. So they would tell because the sailors, the Marines come in and they talk to these bar girls, and they talk about their
Uh,
troubles and all that. And they would say, listen, you ought to come in on Wednesday night. There's a guy that comes in here. And I didn't know it, but I had a street name. They called me Preach. And he said, the guy comes in here. And so I'm serious, Gil. I would go and sit down, and some guy would sit down beside me. He'd lean over and say, are you Preach? And I go, after a while, I realized that I had a name on the street. I said, yeah, actually, how's it going? And then he would, pour out his heart. And I was doing crisis counseling in bars in Norfolk. And after that, I was called to be
that's
yeah, go ahead.
That's a great story, John. That's a great story, and you're
really,
well suited to that too.
Well, yeah, exactly. I didn't know about Gestalt therapy until later, but that's when I realized that this Rogerian therapy that takes months and weeks, just not going to cut it here in the bars where you empathize and just kind of hope that they get well. So when I discovered Gestalt psychology, I just loved it because it was immediate, it was quick, and I was impatient, so it kind of fit my style. Jung and all that takes a long time. It's really, really useful. I just personally didn't have the patience for it. So as you know, because you study Jung, it's a while. So anyway, after that, I was called to Cornell, Ithaca, New York, to be the Lutheran chaplain and eventually the senior pastor there at the church in Ithaca, New York. And that was in 1970 when students were occupying buildings. And so at one point I was crawling I've forgotten who it was, occupied the engineering building. I think it's students for the SDS, the radical students occupied the engineering building, and the National Guard was surrounding the building. And two of us chaplains were identified as being acceptable to both sides, and we were carrying messages and coffee back and forth. And so I go in the building, and there's AK-47s in the building. I go outside, and it's M16s. It was just really really, it was fascinating. And so after my second year, now the story gets to you and your family. So I had started doing training for the bar ministry. I went to my first T group in 1968 while I was at seminary, and it was an NTL T group. I still remember the training. I remember sitting in that circle, tears streaming down my face, realizing that what was happening to me, the experience I was having in that group, in the T group, was an experience of what we were talking about at seminary. Like seminary is theologos, theology, words about God. So it's talking about things like forgiveness, transformation, all that stuff, forgiveness. And I was experiencing it. So I got immediately, Gil, the difference between content and process, between words and experience. And that was a moment that was the beginning of the change in my life. If I had had a T group before I went to seminary, I might not have gone to seminary. You know what I'm saying? Because I didn't even know. So the T group introduced me to the applied behavioral sciences. And then I went to a 7-day Gestalt workshop after that. And my wife Sandy and I had no money, but we put it all into training for ourselves because she was in the work also. So so I'm now living in Spokane, Washington, and I get this. No, I'm living in Ithaca. Sorry, I can still see where I was standing, and I get a phone call from Bob Crosby, your dad, who had called me. Well, let me back it up even more. In and I'm at my age, I start to all the dates run together. So I'm still.
No worries. This is great.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to come back to some. I mean, I don't know if we come back to it, but your experience with theology has been a big influence on me. So
absolutely.
Yeah, in our groups, maybe I mean, as much as the OD stuff, maybe more really. Your ability to talk about like the original.
Yeah, the language,
Uh,
yeah, the Hebrew and the Greek, and
yes,
what Jesus probably meant when he said this, which is not what people think it means. All that kind of stuff. And I've also
yeah,
practiced.
all that stuff.
Yeah,
I've always loved that about you.
thank you, Gil. I mean, when I'm looking at my bookshelf here, I've got a whole section on theology, a section on leadership, a section on OD, a section
Hmm.
on magic. All the things in my life. So let me go back. So
Oh, that's right. You're a magician.
yeah. So look. So here I am. I'm at Cornell. So here, let's back
Okay.
up. I'm at Cornell. It's
Okay.
like 1972, and I'm wanting to get more workshops in this applied behavioral science. So there's a series put on by the Council of Churches in Green Lake, Wisconsin, and I signed up for a workshop. It's like 5 days back in those days, and I'm on the plane.
Hmm.
And there were 4 or 5 different tracks that you could take. So there's like 100 people there, but there were 4 or 5 different labs that you could go to. And I wasn't sure which one to go to. And there was this questionnaire that I was filling out on the plane. Turned out it was from Bob, created by Bob. And then you added up, your scores, and it said this is probably, given your scores, the workshop you should go to. So I filled it out, and lo and behold, instead of going to the one on communication, it turns out I was supposed to do the one on conflict, which was led by your dad. So I show up at Green Lake. I go to walk in for this lab, and I just instantly feel at home. This is how I knew that applied behavioral science was right for me, because every time I read a book or went to a workshop or had a conversation about the applied behavioral sciences, it was like I already knew it. It was giving me language for something that already lived in me, if you understand what I'm saying. And now sometimes it was a
Hmm.
shocking insight, but even the insight was like, oh yeah, I can see that. And so Bob and I make a connection. He has a staff of 2 or 3 people, and on the second or third day of the workshop, I was always being sort of, I think he would agree with this. To use use a judgmental word, I was being attacked by his co-facilitators, and I was always being corrected. I'll say it that way. No, John, that's not quite right. So I remember this like it was yesterday. Bob set me in the middle of the circle, and he pulled his chair out. So now there's 12 or 15 people in a fish. We're in a fishbowl. Bob and I are sitting in the middle of the circle. And he says, he looks
Uh-huh.
me right now. He says, John Scherer, I want to apologize for my staff. They've been criticizing you. And I want to tell you, you really get this stuff. You get it better than anybody I've ever seen before. I'm in tears at this point, sitting in the middle of the circle, because I couldn't figure out. I thought I was, it was all Wallen. It was all John Wallen stuff. And I'm thinking, I get this. I get this. So he validated me in front of the other participants and his team, his staff. In fact, walking back to lunch, he said, I want you on my staff. He said, why are you in here as a participant? He said, you should be on the staff. Next year, I want to be on the staff with you. So Gil, Bob Crosby invited me next year to be on the staff with him, and we co-facilitated the conflict lab at Green Lake, Wisconsin, in like 1973. So I'm in Ithaca. So I'm in Ithaca, and the phone
1973. Okay. Okay.
1973, and the phone rings, and
Okay.
Bob is inviting me to come and be on the faculty of a grad program that's going to happen at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. And I said, "Oh, Bob, I'm the Lutheran chaplain at Cornell. I can't. I can't." So I turned him down. He asked me twice, about a month or so apart. And then a long time went by, and then Sandy and I realized that she wanted to go to the yoga ashram. She was taking her life away with our son, by the way, our 5-year-old son Jay, who's now 50 some years old. And so she was headed off to the
That's
ashram.
crazy.
Literally the day after, Sandy and I realized that we needed to split. We'd been working with a therapist and everything. The phone rings, and it's Bob, and he says, John, I thought I would try you one more time. He said, I was about to call Kibi Hatcher, this actually friend of ours, mutual colleague, but I said, I'm going to try John one more time. Can you believe that? That phone call changed my life. So I said, Bob, you won't believe this, but last night Sandy and I decided that it was time for us to split. So I'm ready to talk. So about a month later, I
Nice.
flew to Spokane. I did a Gestalt workshop in order to cover my airfare. Bob and I met, and we just said, yes, let's do this. Now, but in the meantime, the program had shifted from Gonzaga to Whitworth, but that's another story. I think Ron Short probably covered that, because Ron was a very significant. He was the reason that we ended up, one of the reasons we ended up there instead of Gonzaga. So
Right.
a few months later, I pile everything in a van. Sandy takes off for the ashram out in Pennsylvania, the yoga center. I take off for Spokane, Washington, go across the country, and that's how I got into the grad program with Bob and Ron. Now, why did Bob
Lovely. And
choose me?
The rest is history.
Yeah, why did Bob choose me? I asked that question pretty much every day the whole time I was on the faculty, because Ron had a PhD in psychology, and he was really grounded academically, one of the most solid, and Ron, you know what I'm saying. It's a brilliant guy, and matter of fact, and a fabulous teacher. And Bob is Bob. I mean, he was the spirit and energy behind the thing. And I kept thinking, why am I here? Well, I had some gifts in terms of, like you said, I think helping people, taking very complicated things and making them simple. One of my seminary professors said, John, JJ, they call me, JJ, you're blessed with the gift of oversimplification. But basically, I think I did that.
You're also good at engaging people.
Yeah.
You're also good at engaging and helping people engage. And you and Ron were almost opposites in that regard.
Exactly. And Ron and I had exactly. I always felt like I was having to earn Ron's respect. When I listened to his podcast with you, it just brought back so many memories. The three of us sat in your dad's backyard. I bought the house next to Bob, by the way, when I went to Spokane to visit Bob, in the house with Ruth and all you kids. The house next door was for sale.
Right.
And so I just walked across the yard and rang the bell. It was under construction. It was just finished. And so I bought the house next to you guys. So anyway, you know that story. So that's how the whole thing happened. And I was on the faculty then for 9 years. Yeah.
So 9 years, 73 to 81.
Yep, 81 or 82, somewhere.
Is that right?
Yep.
Somewhere, because I was actually a student in the 81-82 school year. I think you were gone.
I had left. Yep.
Do you think? Yeah, you had just left. Yeah. So,
well, actually, what happened? There were two programs, because there were so many students. They decided to start a second branch of the school. One in two tracks basically. And I had been asked to head up one of the tracks, and my mom got cancer and stuff like that. And commuting from Spokane to Seattle just wasn't working. The program had moved, of course, from Spokane to Seattle at that point. So
right. Plus, by then you were working with Dad in Concern for Corporate Fitness.
Exactly. Yeah.
The OD company that you guys had together.
See, that's another thing.
Yep.
So important. We created what was at that time, we think, the first computer scored system-wide organization effectiveness survey. Everybody has a survey now. Everybody's doing it online. Yep. And the technology, Gil, was paper tape. That was the computer technology in 74.
I worked with that survey numerous times, Ron, or John. So I remember it well, and it was it was a kind of a bear to help groups get through all the data, but you not only was it the first computer survey, perhaps, of corporate culture, but it was also one where it was designed so work groups could get their own data and actually do action research based on the data, which is mostly a lost art.
Absolutely.
Today.
Ron Lippett. Let me back up, because through your dad, I met two of the most significant people in OD at a lab that we were doing. Jack Sherwood, who was one of probably the top active OD consultants for 2 decades, and Ron Lippett, who was Kurt Leving's first grad student, one of his first grad students. And so we were on the staff together for this program. And I remember Jack Sherwood, who's like a god, if you're a magician, it's like talking to Houdini. Anyway, And
Okay.
so Jack says to me, John, we don't have enough participants here to do two workshops. There's supposed to be one on communication or one on conflict, one on OD. So we've decided to combine them. And Bob says, you're really good. So I'd like you to be the lead and I'll be your assistant. It's like David
Okay.
Copperfield saying, hey, John, why don't you step out there and I'll just hand you shit,
Sure. I'll hand
I'll
you a
hand you a
box.
box every now and then. Yeah. But I
Nice.
mean, it was just an extraordinary experience to be on the team with those two guys, and basically Ron Lippitt helped us, create the Concern for Corporate Fitness survey, and he told us later, maybe this quote, that he thought it was one of the most significant contributions to action research since Kurt Levy.
Yes.
We just
Yes.
didn't know how to create a business. We knew how to use it as survey guided development, but we did not know how to turn it into a business. So anyway,
Yeah, well, that worked out
yeah,
for me, John. I mean, all the pain you guys went through meant that Dad
yeah,
was broke when I graduated, and needed an assistant who was
yeah,
cheap, and
exactly.
so I got to go right into OD
Well,
work.
and
Yeah,
and
back in
and the whole
1984.
Pico nuclear plant thing that you guys did, which put Bob on the map, as he
Hmm.
tells me, was actually my project, but I was double booked and I couldn't take the gig. So I referred them to Bob, and he thanks me over and over and over again for that. Because you know what, that was a
Well,
huge project for you guys.
I
Yeah,
thank you too. It's sort of the story of how I ended up in Jamaica in 1999 was because other consultants had been there once for Dad and didn't want to go back because there'd been like some protests about the gas
wow,
taxes.
amazing.
So they said, "I'm never going back." Yeah. So Dad said, "Well, would
You
you
said,
go?" I
I'm
said, "What
young
are you
and
talking
hungry.
about?"
I need the work. Of course I'll go.
Yep.
Absolutely. I've been there.
Eh, eh, And you'll pay me to go to
Exactly.
Jamaica? I mean, this was an easy choice. Uh, cool. So there you were. You were with Leo's those 9 years. That really,
Yeah.
was the birth of the graduate
Yeah.
program, and which we're right now bringing back
Yeah.
into being.
Yeah.
And then you went off into the
Yeah.
world and
Yeah.
Poland. You worked with the
Yeah.
Maasai, and you just started creating your own thing. How about talking a little about that, if
Sure.
you're willing?
Well, how I got to Poland, what I realized uh, a few years ago is that everything I've ever done, it seems to me like everything I've ever done that feels significant, I was invited, the universe, I was called to do. Literally, Bob calls me, you know
Hmm.
what I mean? Come to Spokane and help me create this grad program.
Right.
I was working at GTE, and my client there said, John, we love your work, but we can't afford to send you to all of our regions. Could you do something on video? And I said, sure. So I created the Breakthrough series on video. Is one of the first, video guided programs back in the early 80s, stuff like that. Everything I've done that's been innovative has not something
Hmm.
I sat down to think up, but some responding to some need in the world. So in 2007, I was I gave a talk. One of my books was called Work and the Human Spirit, 1998. It turns out to be the first book that had those
Hmm.
two words in the title, Work and Spirit, Work and the Human Spirit, 1998. And I went to California to give a talk about that to the World Business Academy. And people from all over the world were at this thing. And so a week later, I get a phone call. This woman says, hello, my name is Dorota Ostoy Zavatska. I was in the audience for your talk in California. I have a training company, a leadership training company in Krakow, Poland. We have a client, Orlen Petroleum. It's like Exxon in Eastern Europe. And we're doing a conference down there. And I'd
Hmm.
like you to come and give the same talk that you gave. Would you be willing to do it? And I thought, my God, a chance to go to a former communist country and talk to a bunch of oil executives about work and the human spirit. I thought, geez, I'll do that for free. I didn't do it for free, but I went over 300 or 400 people. men and women from Russia, Eastern Europe, all over there, all high-level executives in this oil company. And I talked about working the human spirit. And Gil, people were crying. Men had tears in their eyes. It's like the concept that you could bring yourself to work, that your spirit, who you are as a human being, is actually not only invited but necessary if you're going to create a team of real people working on real issues. You have to, I mean, what's your alternative if you're not yourself? Then who are you? And in Eastern Europe at that point, you were trained as a child. When you walk out the door of the house, you do not talk to anybody. You don't reveal. People worked side by side for years. They might see a ring on somebody's finger, but they would know nothing about the family, where they went on vacation, none of that. You just kept all personal stuff to yourself. So as a result, the organizations were getting about 10 or 15% of what that person had to contribute, because their feelings, their passion, all the stuff that is important, was left behind because it was too risky. And here comes this guy from America saying, not only you can do it, you have what's your option? You're going to spend your whole life not being yourself, and so anyway, so she comes up to me after, she was in tears. She said, John, I want to come and take your 4-day leadership development intensive in Seattle. So a couple of weeks later, she flies to Seattle with a colleague. She does our LDI 4 days, and she says, Yannick, nobody's doing anything like this in Poland, Eastern Europe. If I called you, will you come and do it for some of our clients? And I said, of course. So Siemens Corporation, I fly over. DHL's executive team in Warsaw, I fly over. And 6 months of flying back and forth, she jokes. She said, well, why don't you just move to Poland? And I thought, I've been single for 4 or 5 years. My wife and I are good friends, but we're living in separate cities. My 4 kids are gone. What the heck? I said, okay, I'll come for 6 months. And that was in August of 2008. 2 months later, the economy in America just collapses. Nobody's hiring leadership consultants, Gil. OD leadership, are you kidding? And meanwhile, I'm in Eastern Europe.
I remember.
Yeah, I'm front page news. That I'm one of the very few people doing applied behavioral science stuff in Eastern Europe in 2007, 2008. And I am working like a mad. I'm going like a mad dog in a meat house. I mean, the phone's ringing off the hook.
Well, meat house. I don't think I've ever heard that phrase.
I have a bunch of them from Richmond. Anyway.
Mad dog in a meat. I like that. Okay, keep going.
So I said, okay, I'll stick around for a little while, because in 2008, the economy collapsed, and I thought, okay, there's nothing to come home to. There's no work waiting for me back in the States, but there's tons of work sitting there, right there in Poland and Eastern Europe. So I went to Asia. I did the first module in the first PhD program in China on OD. It was a module on action research. I did the first weekend in China. I went to Singapore. I went to Spain. I went to London. I went to all kinds of places all over Europe from a base in Krakow, and then I moved to Seattle. So 16 years went by, and I mean that's another story about introducing this deep leadership development work and OD. That's another conversation. But I mean, at my 75th birthday in Krakow, about 25 or 30 people showed up, including clients who drove in from Warsaw and other places. And they put me in the middle of the circle, and they said, Janeczku, how long are you going to stay in Poland? And I said, as long as I'm needed. And then somebody said, well, why have you stayed so long? It was like 12 years or something at that point. And I looked around the room, and I started to almost cry. I said, look, I see friends, I see clients, I see colleagues. I said, I see my tribe. I said, my tribe is here. You're my tribe now. And I remember the moment flying back from Seattle to Poland, and at some point early on, when I realized I was not visiting Poland, I was going home to Poland. So I sold my condo in Seattle, and I'll let that be my base. So now to fast forward, I'm back in Seattle now, but my work is still back there, but so my question is, who am I when nobody needs me? And the second question is, where do I belong? So those are my two existential questions now. But Anyway, that's another story. So that's why I was in Eastern Europe for 16 years. And what happened after 2 or 3 years, I had been sending the CEO of this one of the fast moving telcos, their telephone companies there, the CEO Mirek Godlewski. I was sending him information about mergers because they were doing M&As like Pac-Man, Waka Waka Waka, buying these little telcos all over Poland. And then they got this really big one, and he said, "I think we need you for this one." And so it went really well. And then he called me and he said, "Look, we're buying two phone companies, one of which is bigger than we are. We really need you for this one." So they hired me and my team. I kept telling him there's two things in an M&A. The reason the merger and acquisitions fail is all the effort goes into the acquisition above the waterline, changing the chart, I call it, and not enough energy or any at all goes into changing the heart, which is the merger. So all the effort goes in the A and not into the M. And so he really got it. He really, really got it. So with all these other little mergers, he had this big one buying two companies, and he said, "We need you." So he hired me and my team first. Then he went out and put an RFP out for other consulting firms, McKinsey, BCG. Anyway, they hired BCG to change the chart and us to change the heart. And the HR director there was brilliant. She put both of our teams in the same open space in the building. So we were taking coffee breaks together and all that. And of course, those guys from BCG said, "Who in the heck are you? Why are you here?" And Mirek said, "They're here to make sure we end up in the 25% that succeed instead of the 75% that fail," which is quite often the case with you guys. And after 6 months, it was like a 1-year project. And Gil, it was, according to BCG, their most successful M&A up to that point. And in the business literature, which I couldn't read because Polish is crazy language, apparently this merger was anyway. So after that, really the phone started ringing. CEOs were calling and saying, "Okay, I want some of that." And Mirek was telling everybody about us and so on. So I just had a thriving OD leadership
Nice.
development, you know, practice up until six months ago when the phone stopped ringing, and I thought, okay, the universe is giving me feedback. I've got grandchildren. I want to go to ballet classes and baseball games. It's time for me to come back and be a grandpa. So I told her, at my 75th birthday party, I told the group in Krakow, "By the way, I made a decision to retire tonight," and they all got pissed off. And I said, "No, no, no, no. I'm going to retire. I'm going to put new tires on the car so I can go another 100,000 kilometers." And they all cheered and everything because I was like 75 or something at that point. And so I'm 83 now.
That's
And
nice.
I have no desire to go off and I don't even know what it would mean to in fact, I'm sitting here now looking out in West Seattle, looking at the water and the mountains, and nobody's asking for help. I'm on a podcast with my old buddy Gil Crosby talking about stuff that I did before. So I'm kind of waiting to see what the universe has in store for me, and that's why I started this thing that I told you about earlier, the Wise at Work thing.
Yeah, and let's get into those details. And John, the universe moves in mysterious ways, and so the ebb and flow of people
Yeah.
reaching out. I have faith that they'll be
Well,
reaching out to you again.
yeah.
I did want I just might tell me if I'm wrong, but in the merger, then I'm guessing a lot of what you did was help people connect
Yes.
across the different the
Yes.
companies that were coming together and
Yes.
start to relate
We
to
did,
each
and
other.
I met Barry Johnson, the
So,
polarity management guy, some years ago, and he and I are really, really dear friends
right?
and buddies. And Merrick said that this one module that we did with the top 150 managers from the three telephone companies, we created this polarity map on the floor. And over here on this pole was the Netya, which was the company doing the buying. This is them, their way. And over there was the other company's way.
Mm-hmm.
And there were upsides and downsides to both cultures. So the whole room ended up acknowledging the upside of the other company's way of doing things and the downside of their way of doing things, which created
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? And
Cool.
he said later that that day when you did that changed the entire, not only the way we did mergers, but it started to influence the way other companies understood what happens in a merger, not an acquisition, but the merger.
Sure. Yeah, that could work in acquisitions too.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I
that's
mean,
right.
it's yeah,
You add it to
same.
an,
Yeah,
they, instead of looking at Excel spreadsheets, you get the people in the room and say, start looking at the cultures and why are you buying this company? You know, what is it you don't want to kill? Because what happens,
right.
a big one eats the little one and kills the reason that they're buying the little one. It's just crazy.
And that just totally demoralizes all the people in
Everybody,
the little
exactly.
one.
And then all the good people
Yeah,
bail out. Yeah. Well, let me tell you
sure.
about this Wiser at Work thing. Can I tell you a bit about that?
A- Absolutely, absolutely. I just wanted to come back to that last thing just to
Yeah,
flesh out
sure.
a little bit of what you do so people can hear the sort of specifics a bit. So, yeah, go for it. What's new, John? What are you doing?
Well, it's actually, as usual, an old thing. When the internet was starting to happen, I was living in Seattle, and I was doing my leadership development intensive and OD and stuff. And I asked the question, "Can I do what I do online?" And this voice in my head came back, "No." And I remember thinking, well, that was a useful question. And so then I said, well, how much of what I do might be able to be done online with an acceptable degree of impact and quality? Oh, okay. So then I had a continuum that opened up to me. So the 4 day thing sitting in a room together, that's not going to be very likely to be able to do online. Although when COVID came, we did some experiments in that regard. But all my presentations, all the modules, the chunks of material that I had developed over the years in the grad program and in other work and stuff like that. So I just said, maybe I could put videos, maybe I could create a library, a portal. Now this is 1980, 85, no, 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. And so I got really excited about this concept and I said, I'm going to call it wiseratwork.com. Well, then I moved to Poland and I was called to go to Poland and I had to put this on the back shelf. And so off and on while I was there, I would shoot videos. And so I ended up with about 100 videos, Gil. The pinch theory, you know, all the shadow, the persona, all the stuff that you know about that I've been doing over the years. Group
Hmm.
dynamics, you know, decision making, problem solving, conflict, John Wallen's stuff, all that. I got 100 videos. And so I had to wait and wait and wait. And then when everything calmed down, this woman came to the LDI, the Leadership Development Intensive, and she was a product development specialist with online products with a base in Silicon Valley and Krakow, Poland. And she said, "Oh, John, I want to get your body of work to millions and millions of people." And I said, "Okay, okay, that works for me." And so that was 4 or 5 years ago. And working on a part-time basis, she and I just formed a business with a third partner in California just a few months ago. So we're now launching this thing now. In fact, on December the 5th, next week, we're going to have a launching thing. But it's called Wiser at Work with an @ sign in the center. So if anybody wants to go see what's going on, you could just Google Wiser @ sign work. And the concept is, and
Okay.
I think this is unique, Gil. I haven't heard many other people talk about this. That what happens at work. This is the concept. Years ago, at a yoga center where I used to go to visit my former wife and our son back in the day. And there's a concept in Sanskrit. I tell people I'm a Zen Lutheran here. There's a concept in Sanskrit which says that seva can be your sadhana, and seva is your work. It means what you do when you wake up in the morning. You go to a company, you're a CEO, you're a housekeeper, you're raising kids, you're sweeping the streets. It doesn't matter. Your seva is what you do after you wake up in the morning all day long. And your sadhana means spiritual path. So that what happens at work every day is grist for the mill for your deep development. You can use what happens at work for your own development. So that's my contribution here. That wiser at work, that at sign in the middle is a light bulb. And the idea is that when you learn to shine a light on what's happening to you at work, especially the people, like your faculty is there waiting for you. It's like going to the dojo. I call it, when you wake up in the morning, you're going to the dojo to practice your craft. It's like you're going to the studio to learn to practice your dance or your Aikido or your music lessons or whatever. And every day, your faculty is waiting for you. And it's all those people that you have to work with. And the curriculum is all the stuff that comes up, especially the people and the stuff that you don't want to work with. That's where the shadow comes in, see, because they represent your shadow in some way. And so this is what the Wiser at Work stuff is about, how to shine a light on things that happen at work, the situations that are difficult in such a way that it helps you become wiser in all aspects of your life.
Nice. That we were talking about quotes before we started the podcast, and that is one quote that I have from you that I have said to people is something like the work can be your classroom.
Absolutely.
If you have some way of thinking about where you're learning from your experiences.
Exactly. That's what Ron Short. Yep. Ron said, and I maybe it was John Dewey, I think, who might have said, experience is not the best teacher. Reflected on experience is the best teacher. It was one of your.
Yes, certainly. Lewin also said things like that. Absolutely. Yeah. That experience isn't enough. So apples were falling for millions of years, but it took Newton to have the right context to think about it differently. Yeah. Hey, I'm looking at the website now, Wiser at Work, and I just want to say to the listeners that the logo is Wiser at Work with the A in the middle, like you said.
That sign,
but to find it, it's wiseratwork.com. The at is AT.
Yeah, we're launching. We're introducing the new logo, but you're absolutely right. It should be Wiser AT, WORK, Wiser at Work. You're right. I think we're.
That's how you find it.
I think we're registering it with the at sign. Thank you, Gil, for that correction. I hope people will go there.
No worries.
So I've turned my spare room. Here in West Seattle. I've turned my spare room into a little video studio, where I've got lights and a mic and stuff like that. And anytime, like I might get up from this call, have an idea of another chunk of material, I would just go in and shoot it, and then I send it off to my little team in Poland, and they edit it and put it in the library, and then it becomes a part of a thing. We'll have 5 packages, Gil. There's a B2C model where individuals can sign up and subscribe and so forth. But I think the B2B model, the business to business model, where a company might say, we want everyone in the company to have this language available, to have these concepts and models available to how they make decisions, deal with conflicts, and communicate. So the 5 packages will be communication, conflict, high performance teamwork, change, and leadership. So that they can. It's a keyword searchable thing they can go on. Anyway, I'm just excited, and Aditya, that my colleague said today on a call earlier this morning, because it's 9 hours difference from Poland. I start talking at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is already 9 and 6 is 15, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Poland. She said, John, this is really great. Your work is going to be immortalized. I thought, well, that's great. That's very cool.
Along with your statue at the eventual LIOS complex.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's 3 of us standing there together. That would be
of course
a cool thing.
The photo of you, John, and Dad. Yeah. There's one, to me, famous photo of the 3 of you that would be perfect for that.
Yeah.
And then we'll launch the whole thing into space.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And there'll be fireworks.
All right.
Fireworks in space.
Great. Well,
defy physics.
Gil, when you put out all your quotes, I read every one of them. And of course, a whole bunch of them, a lot of them I went, yeah. And then at the end, I thought, well, darn, he didn't have any of my quotes in there. And then, and you explained that's because, John, you're always on video. You haven't been sending quotes. And then I realized this is an example of wiser at work. I caught myself, my ego wanting to have my name on that list of quotes, right? And then I realized, oh, okay, this is a lesson, because the great quote from T.S. Eliot, one of my favorites: everyone gets the experience, some get the lesson. So I'm having this experience of wishing that my name were on your list of quotes, and I'm realizing, this is a lesson in humility, John. It's absolutely fine for your name to not be there, buddy. You don't need to have your name there to be anything or anybody. Just, it's fine. So it's like letting go of some things that earlier on in my life would have been harder to let go of. So I surrender relatively quickly, things like that. Yeah.
Well, that's nice, John.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, by speaking up, you brought that to my consciousness, and so I intend to figure that one out.
Well, but what's progress?
Not that I don't. I just
well, what's progress, Gil? Is that I'm not saying why didn't you have a quote of mine there, or there's no emotional charge.
Sure.
I'm just to use Walden terms. So what happened in the world, to use my language? Oh, what happened in the world is Gil sent a list of quotes, and there was not a quote on that list from you. That's what happened in the world. Everything else is my stuff that I add to what's happening in the world. Yeah, my interpretation. Sure. My meaning that I attribute to it. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, you're certainly deeply honored by this source.
Well, thank you, Gil. Thank you. Listen, I tell everybody I know that now that Marv Weisbord is kind of, gone off the page, he and I are very, very dear friends and still connected deeply, that now that he's in retirement, that as far as I'm concerned, you are the living expert on the grandfather of our field, of Kurt Lewin. And I tell people in Poland, he was born in Mogilno, Poland. People don't realize that. So a major story that people tell there is this guy, John Scherer, is bringing Kurt back to us after all these years. Isn't that cool?
Nice.
So in a way,
that's nice.
I tell people it was originally how to turn freedom into effectiveness. After '89, when the wall came down, they'd had 3 generations under the Nazis and the communists. They had freedom, but how do you make an organization when that's not hierarchical, top down command and control with everybody going scared every day? So my job was to help create cultures where people could be who they are and could speak the truth and that kind of thing. It was just a huge need there, and I happened to be there at the right time.
Cool. Well, because of you, I'll be there.
Isn't that
June,
great? I'm so
T-group
thrilled.
Workshop.
I think that T-group model. Bob and I wrote an article for the Pfeiffer and Jones series called "Accelerating Group Development" or something like that, and that's where we put those models of the fishbowl and so on, the way of accelerating people in a T group. And I think the way you guys do the T group is just extraordinary, beautiful.
Well, I sure appreciate having that method and leading it. I just led it last week in Jamaica for 2 days. It's astounding, really, how much it can mean to people.
Yeah, it is
have a different experience.
We do this. I mean,
of themselves.
Well, I'm doing this thing called the Leadership Academy for Poland, where I'm one of the faculty members in a program that was created by a guy named Cezary Wojcik in Warsaw, and he brings in a faculty guy from Harvard, Hugh O'Doherty, and the 3 of us have done this now for every 7 years. 40 people from across Poland compete for these slots, C-level people, NGOs, government, industry, arts, everything. It's a cross-section of leadership in Poland. And his mission is to raise all the votes. And in that particular faculty series for the Leadership Academy for Poland, it's just amazing to see what happens when Hugh stands up in front of the room and he says, "Okay, you're here to learn about leadership. I'm glad to bring you some things from the Kennedy School at Harvard. Let's begin." And he's standing in front of this circle of 40 people, and then he doesn't say anything. He just stands there. And of course, it's just like in a T group. And then everybody starts projecting all their expectations, and they get mad at him because he's not leading, he's not exerting leadership, and all this kind of stuff. And so it's like it isn't several days; it's a couple of hours, right? And it's just so rich to see. And then of course he unpacks what happened in the room, and he said, "You don't think I was
Mm-hmm.
exerting leadership? Look at what I triggered in the room here." So so the distinction between authority and leadership, which is from his colleague at Kennedy School, Ron Heifetz, has become a really significant part of my work. And the T group is just a powerful vehicle for opening that up for people. Anyway, Gil, guy, we could do this forever, and I know we've been
Yep.
on for an hour, so I don't want to drag it out.
No worries. This has been lovely, John, and I want to say again, I'm looking forward to being with you in 2 weeks, December 14th. Again, online, and at 6:00. You, Ron Short, and Robert Crosby, my father, will all be gathered to help continue to celebrate. This is the 50th anniversary of the Leadership Institute of Seattle's graduate program coming
Gil,
into
how
being.
can people find that link? Is that something you can send people, that link?
Well, certainly if they ask me, but the simple thing is it's LIOS.org.
LIOS.org. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then there's a whole series. There's various events there that are, you just click the events tab and there it is.
Great.
So that's the easy way to get there. Well, John.
Thanks, Gil. This is so great. Yeah, man. I mean, your work on Lewin is just extraordinary. And now I realize that this is also a really significant part of your contribution to the field and I would say to the world, Gil. So thank you for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And I just hope this gets out to a bunch of people and some of them get back to you because you're a powerful source of wisdom. And so I believe that is a wrap on today's podcast.
That's a wrap, isn't it?
Yeah. So again, thanks so much, John, and I'm going to sign off here.
All right, Gil. Thanks, man.
Yeah, you take care, and I look forward to the next time we connect, hopefully in person. I think I'll be getting to Seattle in 2024, so.
This is Hermit. Roger out.
Okay, take care. Hey, I appreciate you listening. This, again, is Gil Crosby, and I want you to take advantage of what's available to you. I have many free materials. I am happy to talk to people about their situations, especially if you're trying to create change, either social change or organization change. We have frequent workshops that are available, T group workshops. If you have never been in a T group with us, then don't miss it in your life. It's many people have said to me, of all the trainings I've ever received, I got this one 30 years ago, and it's the only one that stuck with me. You're learning from your actual interactions with the other participants and with the faculty. The faculty are walking the same talk that they're teaching of behavioral skills. It's a training workshop. That's what the T stands for. This is done in the spirit of the creation of T groups by Kurt Lewin and his associates. It's for groups. It's for teams. That's how it was originally designed. It is a opportunity to learn about theory and put it directly into practice. Again, the original design, you learn things and then you put them into practice. It was not just all ambiguity, which is how some T groups, most are led today, where the faculty hardly says anything. That's not how this is designed. So join us for that. There's always workshops. There's the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which has certificate programs, a two-year program where you will learn from T groups and learn how to do all the organization development work that my father designed, most of it, and I continue that practice alongside my brother Chris and many other associates. So Don't be a stranger. There's a lot going on. It's always changing. So be in touch, and it's on the website, crosbyod.com. I look forward to working with you in your organization or as you pursue things like reducing gun violence and decreasing racism in our society. Whatever your goals are, the social science of Kurt Lewin guides how to achieve those goals in a reliable way. And so that's what I apply and practice every day and invite you to.